Well, I see meetings as social systems, really.
Whereas I'm focusing on process that I might be missing out on by not thinking about the psychology of the meeting.
There's a thing that I like to talk about that is around speaking with value.
So it sort of fights against this meetings for meeting's sake culture.
A lot of people feel that psychological safety is very fluffy, do we really need that? People should be able to speak up.
So you just come back from Centre Parks?
I have, yes, it was lovely.
I haven't been for years. I've got this memory of it, of being this massive swimming pool complex and just kids making massive amounts of noise everywhere.
It is,
Is that
yeah.
what it is?
And my little boy was able to go on the big boy slide, so he was very pleased about that.
Oh, right.
And there was lots of selfie cameras everywhere. You could do fake snow and things, so I guess that's the world that we live in now, so that was interesting.
It is the world that we live in. They get you to post that then on the socials with their hashtag on it, do they?
It's all about the marketing there, isn't it? Yeah.
Lots of activities to do?
Yes, there was like mini festive trail. He's only little, so we did a little bit of that, mainly swimming, I would say. Yeah, it's a big water park in there.
Right.
Yeah,
it turns like this will be an advert for Centre Parks if we're not careful.
I know, we better not do that.
We'll get them to sponsor it.
Yeah, they should give me some money off for the next trip.
Exactly, yeah. Well, thanks a lot for travelling all the way over here from the east part of the country over to the west to come and take part in this.
No problem.
Shall we do a podcast?
Thank you for having me. Yes, yeah.
Not at all. Hello and welcome to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast from Wellmeadow. Every week we try and come up with something interesting and useful for owners and managers of SME businesses, predominantly here in the UK. And usually, as you know, it's me and Richard wittering away about something or other, but every now and again we are very lucky enough to have a guest, and that's one of those weeks this week. Hello, Christen.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thanks for coming all this way over to speak to us. You contacted us and we started having a bit of a chat, and immediately it struck my interest, and antenna started twitching. Your area of expertise I found very interesting because it relates very closely to an aspect of what we do. But you are an organisational psychologist.
Yes.
Which is interesting anyway, because there's so much we could talk about from all of our experience of working with businesses and some of the stuff we see that we don't understand the way that you would do it. But you came at that from a very unusual angle. You've actually been a practitioner, frontline mental health services.
Yes.
And now you're an organisational psychologist. How on earth did that happen?
So I used to work in the NHS on the front line in mental health, and I just saw systems that didn't work, delayed decisions, meeting overload, burnout in staff, and patients essentially not getting the care that they needed. And I found it quite frustrating alongside a lot of other staff and patients, and I thought I need to do something about this at a higher level. Right. So that's why I decided to go into organisational psychology.
So you took a master's,
yes.
Changed your role within the NHS, and then used that as a springboard to start up your own company?
I did, yes. Yeah, so I did organisational development in the NHS for a little while. Got very good experience in terms of complex culture.
Wow. Couldn't think of many more complex than a million employee organisation like the NHS. Yeah.
Definitely, and especially with loads of different trusts as well. So then I went into private practice and worked in global consultancies, and then started up my own practice as well. Yeah,
which is called Potential Solutions?
Called Potential Solutions, yep, that's right.
And you've been doing that for 7 or 8 years now?
Yes, yeah.
Well done, yeah, it's fascinating. I love it when I hear people making these career changes, especially if they start up a business. We're big supporters of entrepreneurs and startups and all that, so great to hear.
Thank
Great
you.
Story
Quite the challenge.
Well, it's certainly a challenge. You've certainly picked up one of them. And you're now doing a doctorate as well, and you're going to be focusing on something around the NHS as part of your research topic.
I haven't narrowed it down yet. I'd like to do it in the local trust where I used to work, but something around, processes, people, systems, that sort of things, burnout.
Well, okay. Well, stay tuned then. I'm sure we'll stay in touch
and
you can tell us what you've done. Yeah. So the reason that this took my fancy, if you like, as a topic for us to discuss is one of the various aspects you get involved in is meetings. Now, there's lots of other aspects, of course, in what you do as well. But as listeners of this show will know that we do an awful lot of meetings. We've chaired over 3,500 board meetings over the last 20 years, and it's kind of a mainstay of where we've come from, really. So we've seen inside a lot of that senior level of meeting. And whilst we've always focused on the governance aspect, the legal aspect, the process aspect and all that, we've probably never really thought about the psychological aspect of it. And that's something that you've spent quite a bit of time looking into.
Yes.
So just give me a sort of a headline of some of the sort of the key things that might surprise listeners listening to this if they've sat in a lot of meetings.
Okay, so one of the first things that I think might surprise you and the listeners is the cost of meetings. Now, I know we're going to talk about the psychology of meetings, but I was doing some calculations the other day, and if we think about a 1 hour meeting reoccurring for a year, say you've got 12 senior leaders in the room, say that's a cost of £90 per head, that's £56,000 for a recurring meeting for the year. A lot of money. So you would hope that that meeting was going to be pretty effective, wouldn't you?
You'd like to think so, wouldn't you?
You would like to think that that was going to be...
Return on investment for the meeting. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think when you reframe it in that way, where you think, you know, this is costing a lot of money, are we getting a return on investment? Are we moving the business forward? Or is there an aspect of how we're supporting our people within that? It reframes it slightly rather than just having something that we're just having a discussion about.
So it sort of fights against this meetings for meetings' sake culture.
Yeah.
I do worry that some people may see a busy day as one where they've been back-to-back meetings.
Yes.
And you wonder, well, when do you ever get the work done then?
Yeah.
Because the meeting is to marshal, coordinate, communicate, all those sorts of things, but not to actually do much stuff. And
Yeah.
maybe some meetings do, but on the whole they don't.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you reframe it in terms of what's the cost of this, what's the return on that?
Yeah, and it might sound a little bit crass, but I mean, you must have got to the end of the day and thought, what did I actually do today?
Yeah.
And you look back at your diary and you think, well, I had back-to-back meetings.
Back-to-back meetings, yeah.
Well, what came from that?
Yeah. And it's worse these days, of course, because you don't even have the travel time to catch up on some phone calls in between or think.
Or think, yeah,
You're just
exactly.
bouncing from one to the other.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
we'll no doubt come back to that, the advent of the online meeting. So yeah, going back to just normal meetings then, you're right, they do cost a lot. What's the impact that you think, whereas I'm focusing on process, that I might be missing out on by not thinking about the psychology of the meeting?
Well, I see meetings as social systems, really. So obviously you've got unspoken dynamics within the room. Perhaps there's different status, you know, all down to where you sit. You know, we're sat on this rounded table, semi-rounded table. You know, if you have a square table and you've got two people sat at the end and that's more authoritative, you wouldn't perhaps think about that. People that sit in the middle, they might be a little bit more collaborative. So it's those small changes, or, you know, things that people just don't realise make a difference to how the meeting is run.
You mean even without that being formally declared?
Yes.
I've done some meetings with Japanese businesses before, and there's more of a formal structure, who sits to the right of the most important person and who has their back to the door and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You're saying even without that sort of culture making it explicit, it still has an impact?
It still has an impact, and it shows the dynamics and perhaps the culture of the organisation, of who feels comfortable sitting where.
So do you just read that and interpret it, or do you advise to say if you were to control who sat where, you'd do it this way rather than that way?
Well, I think it's better to have round tables if you can. Right. But yeah, you could control that. You could rotate the way you were sitting. But I think more importantly, you know, rotate who's speaking. That's the most important thing. If you think about, we're humans, we're very complex beings. We all communicate in different ways. Yeah. You need to be able to empower those that perhaps feel a little bit less confident speaking.
Now, I've heard some businesses, and I'm sure we've quoted one of these before on the programme, and I can't remember who it is, but where they have a principle, almost a rule, to say that whenever there's a discussion going on, they have to start with the most junior person.
Oh, that's a good
and
one.
work up. Otherwise, there's just this sort of groupthink that follows whatever everybody thinks you're supposed to say.
Yes.
Is there sort of research around that? Is that just a sort of urban myth thing?
Yeah, there's a thing called evaluation apprehension, where if senior leaders dominate the conversation too early, then other people that follow limit what they say. And I think that links back to something we've talked about before around psychological safety and how people feel safe to speak up or to be challenged.
So if you were a senior leader in a business, how might you spot that happening then? Because you might not be aware of it, right? So
there's a thing that I like to talk about that is around speaking with value. So when you're in a meeting and you're seeing that there's one person that is talking rather than thinking, the meeting's being used for talking rather than thinking, that's a warning sign.
Right.
And they're perhaps not necessarily interrupting people, I wouldn't say, but they're using it as a way to flaunt their competence rather than to actually invite others in to speak. it's much more powerful for somebody to ask a really good question or build on somebody's idea.
Is it always used to flaunt competence? I'm reflecting here a little bit, maybe. Some of the meetings I've been in, I'm not sure that necessarily there is always competence being flaunted, but nevertheless I do acknowledge this happens where people dominate the floor.
Yeah, no.
Dominate the floor's sake.
Yeah, not always. Not always, but I think it depends how often that happens in each meeting, depending on who's in there.
And are there sort of clever devices then, or techniques, or how might you, if you were on the receiving end of that, not the domineering one, but the one can't get a word in edgeways, what sort of techniques do you encourage companies to think about?
Well, I honestly do think it comes from the leader's side.
Right.
To notice that and recognise their team members and get to know their team members really well. To know that perhaps that person might want to have a little bit of time to think things through before the meeting.
Yeah.
So there might be something that's sent beforehand so that they've got an agenda.
Right.
So they can think through their thoughts and articulate them whilst they're there. And perhaps speaking to the individual who is dominating the conversation, or maybe not dominating but speaking a lot.
Yeah, offline. I guess that's helpful for in our roles where we come in as outsiders to facilitate and chair meetings. It's easier for us maybe to take someone senior to one side, say just a quiet word, but I noticed that Mary or Fred weren't getting much of a word in, perhaps next time, blah blah blah. It must be harder when it's internal for a junior person to better challenge the more senior one.
But then it comes back to why, do you think? Why do they feel that they can't speak up? Is it a confidence gap? Is it a skill gap? Or is it because they don't feel safe to? And when I say safe, people kind of think that, what do you mean safe? They're not
it's not physical danger.
It's not physical danger, but it is, what are the ramifications of me speaking up? If I speak up, does the leader pause, take that idea on board? Or do they rush it? Perhaps dismiss it or defend that a little bit. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I do, and I wonder that some people come to meetings just wishing that they'd finish. They just want to get through the meeting. Yeah. So they don't want to extend it by raising a new topic or asking an awkward question.
True.
They're just sitting there hoping they don't get singled out to answer a question. It's almost like a interview type thing, but not. But I've seen boards where there are less confidence people in the board really just keeping their head down and maybe looking down. I'm wondering. That seems to be psychologically something going wrong there that I don't, my layman interpretation of it is you're not fully engaged, you maybe don't understand your topic, or maybe there's some sort of quasi sort of power play thing going on, whatever, and you just want to get out of there as quickly as you can. Yeah,
well, there's a lot of layers to that. I think, the person that is wishing for it to finish, like you've just said there, are they not motivated? Are they not engaged at work? You've got meetings as that one thing, but it's a much broader scale in terms of the work that they're doing, and what do they see as the rationale for that meeting? Has that been clear? Has the leader been clear with that? Have the other people in the room been clear?
I think quite often it's not. You're right. There may be a meeting, even if it's called just a board meeting or a department meeting or a review meeting, that maybe hides all manner of sins underneath the surface of what it's really all about. Yeah. It might be to hold you to account in a maybe not very constructive way, show you up, or catch you out, or something like that. Or it might be that it's been dressed up as saying, let's make some decisions together, but actually it's the leader telling you what the decision has already been made and everyone's just expected to acquiesce.
So when you have your board meetings, how long are they?
They can do 3 or 4 hours, something like that.
Yeah. And do you feel that that's, it's a productive, you make a lot of decisions within that time?
Yeah, I suppose because of the discipline, the way we try to run them, everything is focused on what actions are we taking away from the meeting, what decisions are we taking within it. Yeah. But it has to start with a review of stuff. You need input to be able to make those decisions. So we sort of split the meeting into 3 bits, and the first bit's the boring bit, which is just all the governance-y stuff, the conflicts of interest and all the legally bits. Then we do the review bit, where we're just going through people's reports and maybe highlighting, what do we need to discuss anything on this, or is this just for information? And then we look into a more of a strategic last bit, say, right, going forward then, what's going to be different now? What do we want to prioritise differently as to what we all work on? And most companies miss out on that last bit or deprioritise it and spend an awful lot of time doing the review. And the problem I find in this review section is that people, this is where they're just wanting to get their slot out of the way. They want to get through their 20 minutes or whatever it is. I've prepared a presentation. I want to read it off the screen. That horrible behaviour of just reading words off PowerPoints, that everyone drops asleep on. And it's often presenting data without any insight or knowledge. So then I see, either the senior leaders of the business or me in their stead, challenging what's being said. Well, you told me that number. What does that mean? What's the trend on that? Or have you understood why that might be? Or is that significant? Is it material? Or whatever these drill down questions are. And that's where I find people then closing up, because they're seeing themselves being challenged on something. They may have been quite nervous preparing for the meeting and spent hours putting this slide deck together, only for it to be what they perceive to be ripped apart. It's just some questioning. So I'm wondering, what in those circumstances, what's going wrong? Is it that we just have a competence gap, that the person presenting doesn't know their topic very well? Is it that there's something else going wrong the way the meeting's been set up, that they're almost set up to fail? They're never going to be able to present themselves well. Or is it that people just have an expectation that to come to a meeting like that, you need to have a pre-prepared script that you read, rather than just coming with some thoughts and being prepared to discuss openly?
Well, I think the sheer anxiety that it can cause people, but just by calling it a board meeting, people feel that sense of, okay, this is important. This is something that I need to come to. I need to be articulate. There's a lot of stuff around, executive presence and the way that you present yourself in the room. You've got a lot of senior people in the room that perhaps don't have a lot of time, and that puts a lot of pressure for you to then be able to articulate something very short, sharp. And I just wondered, when you were thinking there, what's the impact of that all being done beforehand? So would there be a problem if that was all sent beforehand, the review side of it, and then in the meeting it was the action, lots of questions and actions? That's
the theory, isn't it? And the way we set the meetings up are to do that. So all the reports have to be submitted in theory to 2 or 3 days before a meeting, and then they're circulated before in a board pack, so everybody gets sent the board pack and they're supposed to pre-read.
Okay.
Almost exclusively they don't. And maybe this is different in larger organisations, and certainly organisations where you have a lot more non-execs on the board, because their job is to pre-read the material and come armed with some questions. Maybe even if they're kind, tip off the person they want the question around, tell them, I'm going to be asking about this, just so you can do some research. That would be constructive and helpful. Yeah. But in businesses where you don't have that sort of more formal PLC level of governance, it's more of a small business, like people listening to this.
Yeah.
You've all got a day job. You're just busy, and you've probably blown into this meeting between other meetings that are going on. You're probably trying to sell at one end, and then you're going to review the finances and do something on the shop floor. So you haven't really had enough time to prepare. So people aren't really expected to be very adept at just in at the deep end. Right, show me some material. Right, I've now got to have an opinion about that. I've got to ask a question. Does that matter? And it's quite a tricky skill. Yeah. And I don't think necessarily everybody's had time to develop that necessarily.
No, I think that it does definitely come with experience. And it's that term, though, that we use there around being busy. Everybody seems busy. It seems to be like a default word that everybody uses. But I think flipping it on its head of, this is something that is also making us busy. It is also causing time or costing time, but it's also costing a lot in terms of, people not feeling prepared, the way that might make them feel demotivated, the nervousness it might cause them before they come to the meeting, and then the actions not being as impactful because of that reason, because people haven't pre-read the material. Yeah. So I know people always want to try and put like a number on it or an aspect in terms of time. It would be hard to do that unless we went into more depth. Probably haven't got enough time for that. But it's that forefront side of, I've said to organisations about having a no pre-read, no meeting. So if you haven't pre-read, the meeting doesn't go ahead. And that is a hard and fast rule of you have to do that in order to save that time. Yeah. Hard one to do.
How do you implement that when someone then hasn't? Do you need everybody in the room to have pre-read?
Well, it depends on the meeting, I think.
Yeah, but would you go that far to say, right, unless everybody has read it? Didn't Jeff Bezos have some sort of rule where the first half an hour of a meeting is in silence, where everybody's reading the material?
Oh, I've not seen that.
I think so, because he acknowledged that people didn't pre-read. He said, well, let's not have the meeting without us all being caught up to speed. Yeah. I think he had some pretty strict rules as well about how long people's reports can be and all that sort of thing.
I mean, it makes sense, don't you think?
Yeah, we try and get people to do a one-pager. If we've got a board meeting to cover all the, say, 5 or 6, 7, 8 departments of a business, then to have 20-page slide decks for each of them, it's just crazy. I'm not going to read 100 pages worth of stuff before I come in and be able to retain enough to contribute. But give me a one-pager. Yeah. And even on the one page, we say at the top, just give me the headline. Give me the 140-character tweet sort of length in old words. if you had to describe your month in a sentence, at least give me that bit.
Yes.
And then if I've got a dozen of those for all the different aspects, at least I've got a way of grasping it. Then just tell me what's happened last month, what's going to happen next month, and do we need to discuss or agree anything today? So it's a combination of communication as well as decision making.
Yeah.
But people can't do it. We ask them to, we give them templates, we show them examples, and they still come up with a 20-page slide deck.
They're trying to tell you the work that they're doing.
There's a bit of that.
Yeah.
I think you're right. There's maybe people are feeling this is my chance to show how much my department's done.
Yeah.
And that's back to your point, what's the purpose of the meeting? Are we here for everybody to show off?
Yeah.
Or show some sort of accountability, keep funding my department.
I've been busy. I have actually been busy.
Yeah. As opposed to saying, imagine if someone came along to a meeting and just said, everything's going fine, I'm on target with everything, I haven't got any issues. I don't need the time today's meeting, move on.
Yeah, exactly.
How would the chair respond to that, I wonder?
Yeah, and sometimes it does have to be a bit different for it to make a change. But I do think about that cognitive overload. If you've got a 3 to 4 hour meeting, the people at 3 hours are not going to be listened to as much. They're not. It's not going to be retained as much. Because people haven't got the cognitive bandwidth to listen to that and ask the right questions. So is that productive? And I think back to my days when I was working in assessment and development and I was interviewing perhaps 7 or 8 people a day. By the time you get to the 7th person and you're asking them the same question, it's
You're
just nature. It's natural that you would then have less space to be able to think.
It is, I agree, and 3 and 4 hour meetings are quite long. We have breaks and stuff, don't you? But even so, by the end of it, you're starting to wane. And maybe that's where I described earlier about the sections of the meeting. The bit where you really want people to engage is at the end, and that's not the best place to be from the point of view of freshness. But you do need the input. Either they've got to read it beforehand better, which they don't, or you've got to have gone through it all.
Yeah. And you've got that part around social loafing. I don't know if you've heard that term.
No, social loafing.
Social loafing, yeah. So that's where responsibility is diffused when you've got too many people in the room. So it's easier. And I think back to my training days where, if I train a small group of people of sort of 3 or 4, the engagement level is a lot higher, naturally. You train a group of sort of 25, 30, that's, people naturally tend to just not contribute as much. So I think there's something there in terms of the amount of people in the room, how long the meeting is, whether you've done the pre-read, and how prepared you are for the meeting, and how safe you feel.
See, now you trigger a question there. So in a meeting, there's a particular company I help out at where we've got 4 or 5 on the board, and then 5 or 6 middle managers that come in for an hour beforehand, and we all talk about the various progress in each of the departments. That's a lot of people in the room.
Yeah.
We may well have a dozen people in the room. When some of it is a bit of a show and tell. Each department's going through their 10-minute summary of what's happened in the month. And there's a lot of people just listening, and maybe lots of them know it anyway because they're familiar enough with it, or even if they don't know it, it's not necessarily that relevant to them. If you were to break that down into a smaller group, I think the negative outweighs the positive because of all the FOMO. And people think, I'm not invited to that part of the meeting. What are they discussing that I'm not allowed to hear? And if they come along, they'd be very disappointed because it's all very humdrum stuff that they're either not interested in or they already know. But there is this sense that meeting attendances grow because there's a status associated with who's coming.
Yeah, there's that FOMO of what are they discussing that I'm missing out on, like you just said. And also the leader feeling that they should include everybody so that they don't feel like they're missing out. But there's also another angle to that. When, especially in small businesses, when leaders are promoted from individual contributor to manager, and they actually want that diffused responsibility because it helps them to feel secure because they've got that shared responsibility then. So you have to ask yourself, what is the reason for having everybody here? Should it realistically just be, the recommender of what it is, whatever it is you're talking about, and the decider? Sometimes it can just be two people. And the rest of the people that aren't invited to the meeting, be honest about it. Just explain the reason why and send them the minutes afterwards. This is the update of what we discussed and this is what we've decided. Do you have any thoughts on that? Is there anything we're missing here?
Yeah, almost like producing a consultation document the way the government would do and then invite input. I wonder if that would get much engagement. You're right, maybe when people read the minutes and they think, oh, actually it wasn't so exciting after all.
Yeah, then you've lost that FOMO, haven't you? And people are like, oh, thank God I didn't have to go to that.
Yeah, it's a real hard balance to strike, I think, in terms of that. But you also mentioned that point about getting people to feel safe in it. And I can't help thinking that in the more aggressive environments, in high growth companies, private equity backed companies, PLCs with, crises on at the time, that's probably not very high up the agenda. How do we make sure everybody feels safe around here? This is about, stand up to the key. I need your performance. You've got to deliver this now. And if you can't cope with this high pressure environment, then I'll get someone else in who can. I guess the question hidden within all of that is, where's that balance between making sure people can contribute effectively because they feel safe enough to come along and contribute, or just say, hang on, that's all a bit woke. Let's just, you're here to do a job. Either, stand up and take the blows and get on with it, or go and find yourself another job. How much of that, is that all 1970s old school thinking, and we should be much more sympathetic now to getting people in the right place before we can proceed with the meeting?
Yeah, good question. It is a balance, and I think it has to be in the middle there. But I think a lot of people feel that psychological safety is very fluffy. Do we really need that? People should be able to speak up. But you are talking about humans with different experiences, that perhaps they're going on past experiences where they have done that, and the impact of that is so huge. When you have lost that psychological safety, when you've lost that trust, and you've lost the ability for that person to not challenge or tell you how to do it differently, that's where innovation happens, don't you think? If people feel safe to challenge, then that's where we get process improvements, we get better run meetings, because people aren't scared to say what they feel, and then they know that the ramifications will be, it's good, it's encouraged. And I think one of the ways that a leader can do that is to do it themselves. They're happy to own up if they don't know. You don't have to have that embarrassment.
And lead by example.
Yeah, lead by example.
Well, it's a bit like the Patrick Lencioni philosophy, isn't it? The teams thing. You've got to have that trust layer first before people can properly challenge one another. Otherwise, they don't know whether the challenge is coming from a position of malice, in which case I'm in defensive mode, rather than in a position of collaboration.
Yeah.
So do you have to work a lot on the trust level first with the teams that you engage with then?
I think, the trust level is huge, and I think a lot of that comes... how many times have you had somebody say, I don't know what leaders do all day, or nothing ever changes? I hear that all the time, nothing ever changes, because, I've told my manager this, I've told my leader this. Those small moments just make such a huge difference to the impact of the organisation in the future. If they feel that they can't mention that they think something could work better, and that's why you've employed somebody, because you want somebody else's expertise, so why would you not listen to that?
So there's probably some takeaways of all of that, in terms, especially if you're in control of that meeting. You're going to be the most likely to change that, right? It's very hard to change that from below if the meeting has got a toxic overlay, or just the way it's been set up. But certainly you talk about preparation, agenda, purpose of the meeting. They're all sort of textbook, every meeting should have one of those. But it's understanding that psychologically behind that, you may well be almost wasting your time. What's the point of having a meeting if all I'm going to do is go in with the expectation of just being everybody up for... Well, even if they've had a good month, I'm still going to make it look as if I've had a bad month, because that's my warped view of how I get the best out of people. So it's up to the managers to understand that this is all happening at a different level to be able to get the best out of people. Maybe having smaller meetings, smaller groups, smaller numbers of attendees.
I would say so. I would say that, I haven't seen yet in my experience a meeting where you've needed, sort of 10 to 15 people in one meeting. I think... unless that's a one-off meeting that you're using perhaps for brainstorming, where you're encouraging people to speak up and not asking them to come with a script, fine, have all those people in the room. But make sure you've done the groundwork first to make sure that they all feel comfortable with each other. And that's a much wider angle that we probably don't have time to talk about in terms of the dynamics, between people in organisations.
So that example I talked about, where the middle managers are all asked to come along for a pre-meet, another way of doing that would be to come in one at a time and just have a smaller meeting to talk about your area, and then thanks a lot for your contribution, great, you can go back to your day job, someone else come in. I worry that the psychological impression that people have of that is, it's my turn now. I've got to go in and be grilled or give an account of, and they'd rather have the safety of all their peers around them, because they feel that sort of safety in numbers. Do you think there's some validity in that being a worse way of doing it, even though it's from the best of intentions?
That's a very good point. I would say it depends on the organisation that you have, and how the teams have been formed, who works closely with each other and who doesn't. It can feel like you're kind of in the spotlight, I suppose, if you're going to come in one by one. Yeah. But I mean, we're talking about a very specific type of meeting there, aren't we? We're talking about a board level meeting. If you're talking about more standard daily meetings or weekly meetings, then it shouldn't feel like that's my turn.
No, sure.
It should feel like, okay, we're having a discussion about X, Y, Z, and this is what the outcome is, and this is how we want to move the business forward by the end of this meeting.
But there's this weird hierarchy that has, I think, only when you get to a more senior position in an organisation, however big it is, do you realise how skewed your view of hierarchy was when you were lower down in the hierarchy. You think there's these sort of all-powerful beings above you discussing all these really important things, and then when you get there, you're quite disappointed that it's quite humdrum, really. Yeah. But nevertheless, it has an impact on those people who aren't yet at, say, board level, but are invited into those types of monthly review meetings. Yeah. They impose upon it or project upon it some great sort of, I don't know, view of how it's all supposed to be, how I'm supposed to behave, and it just gums them up. I find a lot of time they end up being less effective as a result. That's
one of the most common things that I hear is, I just want to have some exposure to those senior level meetings. What do they discuss? What goes on at these strategy meetings?
Kind of mystery.
It's like very secretive, isn't it? And it shouldn't be that way. We should be able to be transparent. And I know sometimes the topics are sensitive. I mean, I know I've been in a situation where I've been helping an organisation with like a restructure. Yes, very sensitive things, but that restructures come back to trust. They come back to us leaders being open and transparent about this is what we do know, this is what we don't know, and this is why.
Yeah.
I think that would be useful for people to have exposure to.
Yeah, it's a lot of complex stuff, a lot of layers to this, aren't there? People's expectations.
Psychology for you.
Well, I guess so, yeah. And that's, admitting that's not something I think too deeply about. I'm very focused on process and outcome. Yeah. And of course, in amongst that, the psychology of it all is probably one of the key determinants of whether you get good outcomes.
Yes.
When you think about it. We did say we'd come back briefly to the Zoom meeting or the online meeting element of all of this. I'm still thinking mostly about face-to-face because that's a lot of my meetings still. But more and more we're having multi-party online. So I'm not talking about the one-to-one online, almost like a phone call with a video attached. This is more about multi-party. Lots of people on the screen. Some of them have got the cameras on or not. How's the world changed, do you think, post-COVID, with us all having to adapt to that more?
I feel that still I have found and research that I've read that face-to-face is more effective. There'll probably be a lot of people that can tell me otherwise. I'm happy to be challenged. I feel like you don't have that body language, the unspoken dynamics, the way that we're interacting right now on a screen. Especially if, you've got the rule of you can turn your camera off, Zoom fatigue, that helps for people to have their camera off. But then my question to that would be, if they were in person, what would the difference be? You might have a break outside and things like that. So there's a lot of parts.
What do you think about those organisations then that make you have your camera on?
I personally do agree with that. If you're in the meeting, you're present. And actually it's up to you to make sure that the meeting is not 4, 5, 6 hours long. That's why I don't do training virtually for a whole day, because people can't concentrate.
Yeah. But you also see people who, have got the camera on, but clearly they're doing their emails while they're in the meeting.
Exactly, because they're able to. Yeah. And then did you not think that comes down to prioritisation and boundaries around how much work they've got to do, that they feel that they have to do that work whilst they're also in that meeting? So then what's that meeting for? Yeah,
it might feel they have to, or it just suits them because maybe they don't feel they really need to be contributing to the meeting and they can just dip in and out. But they don't want to not be at the meeting. Yeah. It would have been easier for them to say, I don't need to come to this meeting, I've got some work to do. Thanks a lot, let me know what happens, send me the minutes. Exactly. But they don't, do they? Because there's this almost status or FOMO of coming along. So it's almost, what I hate the most, I think, are these hybrid meetings where I've got some people in the room and I'm trying to chair a meeting with 3 or 4 people physically present, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, how many on screen.
Doesn't work.
It's flipping difficult.
Yeah, it doesn't work because you've got the dynamics of the people that are in the room that are speaking perhaps more closely together, forming a better relationship, and you've got the people that are on screen that feel a little bit more FOMO. Then you get that FOMO again.
You can, I don't know what it is technically, but you can almost talk over the end of someone else's sentence and have overlapping conversations in a way that on screen that just doesn't work. Something to do with the delay or the speaker being I don't know what it is, but it just doesn't seem to work, does it?
No, you don't have that natural, you're finishing speaking because I can see the way that you're moving your hands, your language. You end up speaking over. I've done that many a times when I've been doing training, and it just makes it a little bit more awkward.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, and then you're...
have you? And this whole hand up thing on the Teams thing, I want to speak something. You wouldn't do that in a real meeting, would you? You wouldn't physically put your hand up. There would be something about your body language that made it clear you were itching to say something.
Yes, yeah. So I think there's a long way to go with that.
Yeah, and that's the tech, maybe having done a lot, but not enough yet to completely replace that. But even come to the point where in those situations where someone has to be remote, that those others present in the company will join the meeting from their desk instead, rather than coming in together in a meeting room. Yeah,
I've done that before with training where they've all been in one meeting room and I've been on the screen. And it did work in terms of the dynamics of peer-to-peer discussion, but it didn't work in terms of me, in terms of the way that I was delivering the information. Because you can't really hear properly, there's that awkwardness.
The asides and the way the microphone picks it up. So you're still, generally speaking, a fan of the face-to-face in-person meeting?
I am.
Yeah. Although it does mean you have to drive a lot more.
Yes, nice 3.5 hour journey.
Today, yes, thank you very much.
Great.
Christen, that's really useful. Thank you very much for that.
No worries.
And it's opened my eyes, I think, a little bit just to think about it slightly differently, because we're all in enough meetings and probably don't give that quite enough credit, just to think a little bit about the psychological aspects of it all rather than just process and outcomes.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot. Not at all. Thanks a lot. And thank you for listening to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast. As we say every week, if that has been useful or interesting or sparked a thought, then please tell someone about it, mention it to them in the pub or flick them on an email or something. But in the meantime, good luck with your business.